Okay, I'm going to press start. Okay, that's working. Hi, everyone. I'm Janice Taylor. Welcome to our Relationship Masterclass. We host every Wednesday Relationship Masterclasses. So whether you are single, divorce, in a relationship, having issues, wanting love, anything of those combinations or all of them, all of the above, you've come to the right place. So every Wednesday we have our relationship course. And then every Friday is Finding Faith. Finding Faith Fridays is really to bring you closer to your version of faith. It's not about a religious discussion. It's really about how do we connect to faith. The basis of AHA Healing and what I created was coming to the understanding after 30 years of study, whether it's love you seek, a career change, your masterpiece, your life, your relationships, your parenting, whatever it is, that you really cannot heal without faith. And the basis of this whole thesis really comes back and understands and is connected to that fact. So today we're going to talk about relationships. In the last couple of weeks, we really just talked about the 3 secrets. We're going to change it up today, and we're going to bring in some of the questions and feedback that people have been giving us, but mostly because I want to connect these disparate parts. And so today is going to be about the relationship and the calling. And now I hope you can see that. I don't know if you can. If you can't, I may have already messed it up. And it could be a day where I don't have a slide deck because it could be gone. But here, let me just pull this up for you. And I'm going to turn screen share on. And we're going to pull this up here. And I'm going to share the screen. And I'm going to do a slideshow. And now hopefully you can see that. If you can see that, wonderful. So AHA Healing, what is it and what are we about? You know, when I was putting this together, I started this journey trying to look at how people heal. It started for me when I was about 8 years old. When I was 6 years old, my parents divorced. My dad was an addict. And I started in the 80s trying to get a grip of who am I in all of this? And even as a young child, I felt that much of what I was witnessing wasn't necessarily something a child should. I had enough awareness, I think, and I was a pretty smart kid to think, well, what is this really about? And so in the 80s, they decided to give us one cable channel. And on the cable channel was Oprah, of all people. It was wonderful. We got this cable channel out of WDIV Detroit. And Oprah would say, have an aha moment. And I was like, what is an aha moment? Like, can I order it in the catalog? We used to get the Sears Wish Book. I was like, is this in the Sears Wish Book? Like, how do I have this? How do I get this? I really wanted to understand that. And through that, started to hear this word, ahava. Ahava is the Hebrew word to give love. And the process I made, I ultimately decided to name it after that because I thought, what if the aha, whether it's love in your relationships, parenting, who you are as a human being, as a singular entity, that perhaps the aha, the moment, the crack in the manifold, is the moment that we know that we are loved, period. That we don't have to seek love outside of ourselves, that the love really exists within ourselves. And I thought if I could understand that and get to the roots of that, that we could heal. So this has been a little bit of my journey. I started in Canada. I'm Canadian. I went into music, sports, and entertainment after I created my first tech company. And it was through that whole process that I went from pharmaceutical industry into sports, music, and entertainment to leave the tech industry after almost 14 years to come to this place now where I am with AHA Healing. So I've had some pretty interesting experiences, to say the least. I'm happy to be an honorary captain of the Navy, but what I'm most proud of has been the observances of different types of industries. So my roots are psychology. My education is in psychology. I went into pharmaceuticals, into the pharmaceutical industry for a decade. Then I was in technology. So at 3 different time periods over the last 30 years, I looked at human emotion from these different lenses. First, the lens of growing up in a divorced household with a dad who was an addict, spending a lot of time and experiences I shouldn't have been as a child, to the legal drug addiction, to ultimately the what I call the invisible drug of technology. Each of these experiences really helped me come to some level of understanding about how do we heal. So if we think about the world right now, the world's pretty messed up. It is. Like, we can just be honest about it. People are struggling. There is a silent epidemic. There is an invisible addiction that is taking all of us away. It is separating us from our soul. We're trying to have relationships, but the weight of the world is really tearing those relationships apart. Really, 1 in 4 people are suffering, but really, I think it's all of us on some level are experiencing emotional disruptions. If you think about your relationship, over 75% of them are in trouble. And if they're not in trouble, they're potentially on their way. And so there's a lot of strife, I think a lot of emotional pain, and there is an epidemic that is happening. So when I started to study emotional pain, now if you think about yourself, you're really 4 quadrants of the self. If you were to draw 4 quadrants, you have this quadrant, maybe it's in your physical, this your mental, this your spiritual, and then you have your emotional. And if you think about the 4 quadrants of the self, balance is really key. We spend a lot of time in our mental parts of our quadrant. We talk about mental health. We're in our head a lot. We're in digital. We're working. That's a lot of time in our logic. Then if you think about, well, maybe we spend a little bit of time in our physical bodies. Maybe we are having illnesses. Maybe we're exercising. So we tend to pay attention to the next construct when we're not in our head, our physical body. But then you think about our spiritual. We've disconnected from churches. Perhaps we're not really as spiritual. We talk about spirit and spirituality, but do we feel the spirit? Do we feel the soul? And then we talk about emotions. Most of the time, people think most emotions are reactions. You react emotionally to things, and that's actually false. Emotions are a system. And emotions live in the body. They live in the spirit. They live in your subconscious, old pain and new pain. Emotions are how we respond in any given moment, and we feel it. We either feel a spike or we feel a release, or we're in specific places within digital, for example, we're getting dopamine hits, and that's causing an inflame on our emotion. But what really fascinated me, and if you follow any Gabor Mate, he certainly talks about this psychic break. I wanted to understand the wound. And as I mentioned, my roots are psychology. So just for a minute, take a moment and think about this. 99.9% of the world has an emotional break, a break in the spirit, what we call the wound. Just like a little crack of lightning, but sometimes it could just be a sliver. Maybe it's just a sliver. If you've ever picked up a piece of wood and it's in there, and sometimes you can't even see it, but you can feel it. It's kind of how the wound works. 99.9% of the world, prior to their 10th birthday, got a wound. Now, in some cases, the wound is severe. Severe abuse, separation, parents' divorce, you name it. There's lots of wounds to sort of catch all of this. The way we define it here at AHA Healing is it's a break in the spirit. It's just enough of a crack in the manifold for you to start to think that maybe this world isn't about love. The other thing that happens when you experience your wound is a thorn. Now, as I mentioned, my roots are psychology, so some of you may feel like you're in a Psych 100 class, but here it goes. There's different schools of psychology. Started with the psychoanalysis, then it went into behavior psychology, cognitive behavioral psychology, and then something was created called humanistic psychology. You've maybe heard of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People have talked about, the hierarchy of needs for a long time. Ironically, Abraham Maslow died in Silicon Valley. Talk about ironic. But he created something called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Those hierarchy of needs are your basic needs: food, shelter, love. There's some of your basic needs are met. And just above that is love and belonging. So if you just take a minute and think about the world today and why we all spend so much time on digital, are we searching for a place to love and belong? Are kids today searching for love and belonging? Most of us don't intend to cause the wounds to others. We don't intend to hurt people. Even sometimes the most heinous acts, it's not often intentional, but it happens. And so when you get a wound, a thorn enters the wound and stays there. And that's really important to understand, because you can continue in your life 10, 20, 30 years. And unless you've plucked this thorn out, it has its own gravitational pull. It has its own laws of attraction. It has its own being. And over time, it becomes an abscess. At first, you spend a lot of time running away from your wound and your thorn. I know, I'll just change the way I look. I'll get married, I'll do this, I'll do that. Everything outside of yourself. But that doesn't change the fact that the thorn is still there. You can numb and stuff a thorn, you can ignore a thorn. But when a thorn is stuck in love and belonging, it's in charge. Now, most of us don't want to admit that because we think our head is so powerful, but it's not. It has no armor of defense when you have a psychic break. And if we don't acknowledge the psychic break, this is what happens. Above the surface, you can be a put together person. You can meet people all the time and you're like, well, they got it all together. Could look at me and say, oh, she's got it all together. What is she talking about? All I can tell you is that my iceberg of old pain below the surface pretty much ruled my life for a good 30 years. And I wasn't even close to any of the person I wanted to be. I was a woman on a mission to forget my past of pain and to become something else. I married my pain. I had to divorce my pain, and I had to change my body, and then realize I'd done all of this work, made money, changed my face, had plastic surgery, you name it, only to come to the conclusion that this pain and this thorn was alive in my body. And when you're in relationships, this is the most important thing to understand. If you are between the ages of 18 to say 30, chances are, unless you've plucked out this thorn, you are dating or married to your pain. You are hoping that this person will take that pain away. Not a conscious thought, a subconscious thought. It's a subconscious part of the attraction. You bring to you what you think that you need in order to heal this pain, but ultimately it doesn't work. So what happens after a decade? So if you've been in a relationship for a decade, you're probably going to notice that this drug stops working. The drug of this pain. He's my hero. She's my savior. Oh, he does this or she does that. And you've done all this compiling on each other. And then eventually you look at each other after about between the 7th and the 10th year, the seven-year itch that we hear about. And you start to go, God, he annoys me. God, she drives me nuts. Like if he talks to me one more time, what you start to realize is that the drug starts wearing off. Human addiction is no different than real drug addiction. Drugs stop working, as do humans. Humans no longer can do for us what we think they can do. And here's the real kicker. It was never their effing job. It's not your partner's job to tend to the needs that is yours to tend to. It's not your partner's job to solve your pain. That's your job. If you're an adult, it's now up to you to heal this wounded part of you. And if we go back again, it starts with a wound, then a thorn, and then this pain gets buried below the surface until emotion happens. And emotion will happen. We can walk out our front door, emotion would happen. I drove by a woman today, she gave me the finger. Emotion can happen. We can go online, emotion can happen. Most of our emotion right now is just old pain. So this was the system of Ahava that I wanted to put together. I studied, and I love my psychology roots, and much of what I've created really leans into psychology. But I also love philosophy. And I really loved religious studies, and I never grew up in a religious environment, so I wanted to understand it. I looked at New Age healing. I looked across so many different things, and this is what I concluded. You are a AA battery, and you have two sides of the self. You have an ego side and you have a soul side. Your ego lives in dark, fear, and external to you. And your soul side is light, love, internal to you. If you think about anything in our life, everything is opposites. Two eyes, two hands, two arms, two legs, the sun, the moon. Go on and on and on, and see that at any given moment, two things must exist at the exact same time. Otherwise, there's no charge, there's no energy to it. So in every moment where you're experiencing a spike of pain in your relationship, the soul is present at the same time. When you experience your soul, the ego is lurking at the same time. You have two voices competing for you at the same time for every moment of your given life until you pluck out this thorn and you can live on the soul side of the moon. But you need to think about emotional pain like a system. So in relationship, at first, it's the drug. Oh, this person's going to take all my pain away. I'm going to be saved. They're going to be saved. It's going to be amazing. Let's have the big wedding. We do all of this. And then the drugs wear off. And then this is what happens. We start to believe the first thing, which is embedded in us prior to our 10th birthday, that we're not worthy of love. And when we start to believe that we're not worthy of love, we start to look for love outside of ourselves. We start to look for proof. So we look at our partner, prove to me and show me that you love me. The beautiful book, Love Languages. This is how I'm going to love you. I'm going to shower you with this love so that you know that I love you. Well, what if they don't do it? What if they just say, I'm done, tired, I'm out? What about then? Does it mean that you're less loved? Does it mean that they don't love you? If you are always looking for love and the signs of love outside of yourself, this relationship is doomed. It's doomed because that person can never meet what your demand is. Your emotional pain, that big P, is a bottomless fucking pit. Yes, I can say it. It's a bottomless pit. Just when they meet the need, the next thing will come out of that pit because it's not their job. And when you're in relationship, you activate both of your big Ps. Both of you have a big P. Both of you have unresolved pain inside your body, and both of you have thorns in your body, and both of you have an inner job to tend to that. It's both of your responsibilities to heal that part of your heart. And unintentionally and intentionally, we inflict wounds on each other, mostly because we're just trying to get old pain out of the body. Often, old pain about someone you've never met before. You didn't meet them when you had your pain point. You didn't even know they existed. But the laws of attractions of pain brings the two of you together because of your codependent triangulation. Codependency is human addiction. It's not just what Melody Beattie wrote about in Codependent No More. Codependent is addiction. It's human addiction. And there are three types that we'll often see in triangulation with each other. Victim, martyr, perpetrator. You'll find each other like flies to rice, like bees to honey. It is an attraction because you want to solve your pain. And so how you dealt with the pain as a child is you changed your behavior outside of yourself so that you could quiet whatever pain you witnessed. So here's an example. Father maybe is what we would call your classic predator, chaotic, mean to your mom. You witnessed that and you saw your mom in a classic victim. She was the victim to the father, the perpetrator. You, the child, would end up being a martyr, a people pleaser, going to quiet all this chaos of all this pain. You're going to change yourself to adopt the roles that other people hold. It's a learned behavior that we learn as children. We learn it as children, and then we stick with it because we stick with what we think works. And what we think saved us from pain is going to be what we need in order to be in love and relationships. So that's why people always say to you, you married your father, you married your mother. And people are like, why did I do that? You did that because of codependent addiction, because of that triangulation of a learned behavior. You did it without even wanting to do it. You did it without even knowing that you did. There is no shame and blame in this. It's just facts It's just facts. The thorn and the wound is at the center of this codependent triangulation. And that's in charge of your relationships. So when you pluck out the thorn, then you can move to the light side of the moon, which is what we made over here on Ahava. I wanted to make a map. I thought, okay, if this is a system of emotional pain, this is my vibrations, which are scarcity, bringing me more of the same. I've learned to be a codependent. My dad was an addict. Even if your dad is not an addict, families that have emotional pain create codependency in their homes and in their households. So yes, if you and your partner, husband or spouse, are having emotional pain and activations of emotional pain, yes, if you have children, yes, they're learning it, but they can unlearn it and they could heal it. So don't panic. Don't panic. There is a way forward. So this is how it looks when we talk about the codependent triangulation. This is the laws of attraction before you do your healing work. Let me say that again. Your codependent addiction attraction of martyrs, perpetrators, or victims. So if you're a martyr, you're going to date or marry perpetrators and victims. If you're a victim, you're going to marry a martyr or a perpetrator. It's a condition. It's conditioned into you because of emotional pain. At the center of that is your wound and your thorn. So if you've not done any of the core root emotional healing trauma work, chances are your relationship is built on this foundation, which is this martyr foundation. You do not want that to be your foundation. In fact, you both can heal it so it's not part of your foundation, but initially it will. And this is what you need to know out of everything you're going to take in this masterclass. It's a silent drug. It's a drug. It's a drug. You think it's solving your emotional pain by people pleasing and being a martyr and taking care of everyone else. You think it's giving you love and belonging, but it's not. It's no different than you think you can handle a heroin addiction. You can't. You can't. It's changed how you see things. And if you can believe that for a minute, then you can heal it. And then you can move out of your codependent triangle and into your golden triangle where your soul lives. But first you need to stay right here. And if any part of you that doubts it, that's your ego. It's trying to keep you the same. Silence the ego so you can move to the soul. So when all of this happens, you have a wound, thorn comes in, you move into codependency, you try to control humans, you think humans have power to heal. They don't, I don't, no one does. You cannot heal the thorn without faith. I tried. I went everywhere. I went to Bali. I went to Alaska. I went everywhere. I tried. You can only get so far, about 75% of the way there, with any traditional therapeutic approach. So some healing work, some therapists do trauma work. They can get you there under one condition. Do they ultimately teach you the map, give you the actual playbook, like here you go, as well as including faith? Now, this is what was interesting when I was studying Abraham Maslow. Abraham Maslow really got to a place where he made this pyramid. And so you have, again, your basic needs, food, shelter, etc. Then you have love and belonging. Then you have self-actualization, and then you have transcendence at the top. And I thought, what does self-actualization and transcendence mean? Well, self-actualization genuinely means that you now know that you have a calling, that you by yourself are responsible to heal. You recognize and know that you're part of something bigger than yourself. And you can transcend to that top part of the pyramid where you know that this form and matter of who you are as a human being ultimately transcends into the soul. And you can live in the soul while you are having a human experience. But there's a map for that. And it's the map I wanted to make. I wanted to make like, okay, great. I know this now all in theory. So now what? Like, how do I get there? Where's my soul? Like, what's my faith? I never grew up in any kind of a religious environment at all. My mother was so broken after my father left that she said, well, the father that she knew or the God she knew wouldn't give her the father or wouldn't give her the life that she had. She was so disconnected from her faith because of a broken heart. And I started to think about, why do we disconnect from our faith, that inner knowing? I believe faith is an inner knowing of your soul that is connected to something bigger than yourself. How you get there, that path you take, I believe that's individual. I don't think that a Muslim faith can tell a Jewish faith, tell a Christian faith, any of those faiths, what that pathway looks like. And if a human is telling you that that's the only way and they know that to be true, I kind of give a giant middle fucking finger to that, because I'm not so sure. I think that each individual soul really has their own way to get there, to their faith. But we begin at the same place, all of us together. This is where we are all in it together, all human beings. We all have a soul. If you don't believe you have a soul, then you should probably not watch this video from this point on, because this is just going to be food for your ego, and it's probably not going to be for you. And that's okay. Come back to us when you start to allow a thought that maybe you have a soul. You have a soul. Lots of studies about your soul, lots of data that points to it from different perspectives, from Carl Jung to Einstein. Lots and lots and lots and lots of different data points from philosophy to science that would suggest that you have a soul. But don't just take my word for it. I'm going to hopefully prove to you today. So what separates us from our faith? What separates us from feeling this? So let's go back to the original thought. You have a wound, causes a thorn, causes pain to stay in the spirit and the body. And over time, it festers, becomes an abscess, separates you. Codependent addiction convinces you that humans have the power to give you the healing that you already have as your birthright. You think humans are the one to give you love and to solve things. You already have that as your birthright. You don't need another human being to do that. But this is the cherry on top. We then use shame and blame when people want to go and discover who they truly are. And Brené Brown brought us such a beautiful gift with shame, did she not? And her research to really talk about, what is the feeling of that? I wanted to get to the core roots, what's happened, and then what's the weapon. When people want to have pain and leave the body, we shame and blame people to stay in pain. Meaning, we shame you. Oh, I can't believe you feel this way. Well, it's really not my problem. We shame you from it. Or we blame other people. We are fabulous blamers. Shamers and blamers. Shame and blame. Shame and blame. Shame and blame. Shame and blame. We shame you and then we blame you. So if you have emotional pain from your family, your parents, whomever, you feel that it is your job to continue to blame them for it. Like you're the judge and jury to hold them accountable for what they've done to you. You're not the judge and jury. And I know that's hard for your ego to understand. You're not here to bring justice to them. Justice is already served and it will be served. Maybe not in the way that you like, maybe not in the way you want to control, but it will happen. Why? Because they're connected to an all-knowing being of their soul. And that sends the karma, the cause, the jury, the judge of that. They will already have to pay in ways that is beyond your imagination. So why would you tie yourself to that? Let's go back to the codependent addiction. The weapons of codependent addiction are shame and blame. So if I shame you and blame you, I stay here with you. And if I stay here attached with you and I don't leave you, I don't have to deal with that feeling of being abandoned in it. So again, we're under this illusion that our love and belonging is so tied up to other human beings. Our love and belonging does not predicated on other human beings. You are not their judge or jury. You don't get to decide how that person experiences their own regret. And I know that's hard because as kids, we want that moment. We want that moment where the dad has the epiphany and says, I'm sorry, I did this to you. I will own everything. They could own it and it doesn't change the thorn. They could deny it and it doesn't change the thorn. The inside job of healing is just your job. Humans can support you, but ultimately they can't give you what they seek. So this is what I really wanted to do at AHA. I wanted to take this emotional pain, this system, all of this, take all of this data and bring it over to the other side of the moon. And remember, we're two sides. We have the dark side, we have the light side. We have the right side, we have the left side. We have all of these sides. I wanted to take all of this data and information and move it over to that. But how do you do that? So I wasn't content with just the explanations I found in psychology. I wasn't content with just give it to Jesus. I wasn't content with that. I wanted to look at as much as I could over its 25 years of real study, but really it's been the last 30 years. And if I really calculate, I'm going to date myself, 40 years. I was 8 years old when I got the first book for Alateen, Children of Alcoholics. It was the first time I had my training. And as I was reading about codependency, so again, I was 8 years old. This was in 1983. That's how long ago it was. 1983, I started to think about that codependency and addiction didn't feel that different from each other. One felt that we used a drug to numb and stuff our pain, and the other that we used humans, but they felt so completely connected to me. I wasn't content with the explanations I was getting. And by the time I was 13 and 14, it was like, oh, you have an 85% chance of becoming an addict. That's what I was told. I went into an aftercare program for addicts to prevent me becoming an addict. Later in my life, I worked with different people that were in addiction programs. And addiction is really fascinating because it's one of those things that we as a society look at and we think that that's not us. We're not that. But if you really looked at our society and specifically technology, you would see that all of that technology is actually built to create more shame, blame, and pain, more codependency. The entire mechanisms of it is predicated on your pain. So I looked across this vastness and decided it was really this tree. And if you think about all these disciplines and different theories, and I've missed dozens of them, I know I have, I pulled from the ones that I thought had something in common. What do they have in common? And you can look at all the different trees. And you know what the one thing that trees have in common? Their roots. If you looked at humans across the vastness, what you would notice that they have in common? Their root story, where they're from, parents. Babies can only be born to a man and a woman. I know that people don't want to talk about that, but that's just the truth. We're all born to that. That is a truth. There is no changing the biology of that. The nurture and the nature of all of that can change over time. And so because of that, I thought, well, if I took all of these theories and I looked across the four spectrum, the four parts of the self, how does this system show up in relationships? How does this impact when we parent? How does this, when we go to first pick a partner? How does this show up in our workplaces? How does all of this show up? And I wasn't satisfied with what I saw. So I made my own. And so when I was looking at this, I thought, I need a new 12 steps. I'd learned the 12 steps. I'd read Al-Anon One Day at a Time. I'd gone through that process. And I liked some of the 12 steps. I certainly knew what they were saying in theory, but I felt that they weren't as hopeful. I felt that shame was still part of the equation. And I felt that people can't heal when you shame them. Your relationship can't get better when you're shaming your partner. It just doesn't. People don't heal with shame. They crumble, they shrink, they attack, they deflect, but they don't heal by using shame. So when I looked at the 12 steps, I was like, wow, one of them is for you to go and say that all of your wrongdoings and to feel that you have all this shame. I thought, fuck that. Like that just did not feel right to me. And so, but I did think, well, what is with the 12 steps? Why do we have 12 calendar months? And then, of course, I learned about Joseph Campbell and the beautiful movie of Star Wars. Yes, Star Wars. I thought, maybe, just maybe, I could take that and I could create a healing process to go with that. And that if people in relationships were each doing this at the same time, no matter who you're dating or not dating, that you could bring that together into your relationship, and the bones of it would give you a structure. So we are at step 1 of your relationship, the calling. We have a call to be in love. We have a call to be in relationships. We have a call. It's not what Hollywood would like us to think. Oh, you have one person and they come on a white horse. Bullshit. No. It means that you heal what is in you. You get full of love, and then you seek partnership. In our codependency, we seek drugs. In our healed state, in our calling, we seek parallel tracks, true partnership of 2 people pursuing what is given them to solve. And this is what I came to understand about the calling. All of your emotional pain, every single person in the world, everyone has a calling. Now, religion would say the calling is to serve Jesus or to serve God or Allah, depending on who you do. Yes, and that is certainly a definition of the calling. I believe all of your emotional pain before your 10th birthday is the ingredients that you need in order to actually bring your calling alive. It was your initial training ground. And when you look at Joseph Campbell, when he created the hero's journey, calling is the first step. And he talked about the fact that everyone really is the hero of their own story. And so if you are in a relationship, you were brought together for potentially one of 2 reasons. One, you want to solve your pain. And you thought this person could solve that pain. And then maybe you are disappointed that they couldn't do it. And here's the gig. They can't. They can't solve your pain. You can solve your pain. They can solve their pain, but they can't solve your pain. They can't. That's not their job. It's your job. And when you solve your pain, you can take your pain data for your calling. And this is where it, for me, was so incredibly beautiful. And in psychology and the roots of psychology, just over the last decade or so, 80% of all of the empirical research on the calling has been published, meaning there's a resurgence. And I love time periods. So if you kind of look at 2011 when this started, we were kind of coming into a time of mass consumption. Facebook was everywhere. Twitter was everything was everywhere. We were like consuming monsters, like scroll, scroll, scroll. We all got phones. I was living in Silicon Valley in 2012 and my eyes were burning out and my steam was coming out of my ears. I was like, what the fuck is going to happen to us when everyone gets these devices? I saw it as heroin. I was horrified. I was picked out of Canada as some of the tech women in Canada to go there. And I'm sitting in these HQs in the head offices, and they're like, isn't this amazing? Like, we're going to be able to feed everybody this stuff. And all I could think about was that all of this was going to take you away from truth, from who you really are, in your roots, your true self, and that it would inflame your pain. That's what I thought it would do. Most of our technology is actually built on the Pavlovian model, which, if you know anything about Pavlov, is terrible. It's behavior conditioning. You ring the bell, the dog would salivate. He did heinous, terrible experiments and kind of created a monster. But if you look at most of technology, right into the bell is a push notification on your phone, it brings us out of ourselves into this world and separates us from who we truly are. So it's not a surprise that we all started to go, is this good for us? And then in 2020, a pandemic hit and the world had to stop. We had to stop flying. We had to stop moving. And guess what we have now? A buildup of extraordinary amounts of pain. We didn't have all of our ways to get it out of us. So it sat there. And old pain got mixed with new pain. And we just have this explosion of pain. So what we've really seen is an increase in the curiosity. So coming back to this on Abraham Maslow, the thorn comes in here, right here, love and belonging. That's where it shows up. Impacts your self-esteem and your self-actualization. Now there's really transcendence is the other part of it. So you need to imagine every human being that you meet, somewhere between your physiological needs and your love and belonging is a thorn. The person you're dating, thorn. If they didn't do this work, they've got a thorn. You've got a thorn. Your thorns are activated together. It's not, oh, if he just puts down the toilet seat, your relationship's going to be great. I once had a couple literally walk into my office and she just said, fix him or I'm fucking out of here. Fix him. Now, I know well and good enough that it's not just a one person problem. A one person can do behaviors that can really hurt someone else. But I know at the core roots, when you get beyond all of that, at the core roots, both parties, both people have a thorn. You have a thorn. We have to pluck the thorn out so that the root can lie back down. So you can grow to become the tree that you ultimately want to be. So here was my epiphany. Now, in religion's view, the calling is we are made in the image of God. And I thought, well, what does that even mean? Now, again, I didn't grow up in religion. That was not something I went to, wasn't anything. I learned about it because I wanted to understand healing. And I couldn't understand healing without actually studying religion. And I needed to study religion so that I could put together psychology, philosophy, religion. I was like, here's all these schools of thought where thought leadership has come out of. What are they really saying? And what does it really mean when we're made in the image of God? And what I loved about it, that it concluded, was that statement was to say that each of us are. It didn't say, oh, you're made in the image of a Muslim God or a Jewish one or a Christian one or a Buddhist one, just God of the all-knowing being. And Carl Jung was really, towards the end of his life, really talked about this all-knowing unconscious being, that we are connected to that. I do believe in the universality of that, that if you imagine this big world, and there's all these different ways into the center, and at the center of all of this is our faith and our soul. How we get there is not your problem. That's God's problem. It's not your problem. And as I mentioned, this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful movie. Now, I never saw the original Star Wars until, I don't know, it was like 5 years ago, I think, something like that. I never did see the original. But Star Wars was the original movie that really used Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. George Lucas and Joseph Campbell were buddies. And they're like, okay, I want to make this movie. And so if you look at the hero's story arc, so right now, hopefully you're listening to this by this point, Google The Hero's Journey, and you'll see this cycle. There is a cycle. Goes to the hero and then the refusal. So next week, we're going to dive into beliefs on relationships. But the first one is the calling. And what Joseph Campbell really said with The Hero's Journey is that everyone is the hero of their own story. It doesn't mean that you're not in partnership or relationship and you take away your own story so that someone else can have that. That's not healthy. Whether you have children or not, or marriage or a house or chores or anything, every single person is the hero of their own story. You are the Luke to your story, the Laura to your story, or the Leia. No, Luke and Laura. No, that's General Hospital. No, it's something else. The Leia. You are that to your own story. And so tapping into that is to understand that the first thing that we literally have to kick, the real habit we have to kick, is this. Because when we don't know our calling, when we don't know that our life matters, when we're not connected to our faith, we will live in these roles in perpetuity, acting them out, doing terrible, awful, fucking mind-blowingly ridiculous stuff. You may cheat on your partner and defy your character. You may hurt your partner physically because that's what you've been conditioned to do. There is horrible, heinous, awful things that happen to people every single day right now. There is a small percentage of them that are truly sociopathic without any feeling whatsoever. They are completely disconnected from your soul. Then there's all of this bucket in the middle where you have victim, martyr, perpetrator, people that are acting out of their emotional pain in all kinds of ways. And we're really hurting each other. And we need to look at this very much like addiction. So you are a battery. Think about that just for a minute. Both ends of the battery must go in the right way in the remote control for the remote control to turn on. Think about the radio. Think about your car. Look at these two energy forces. Now, I'm sure the scientists are going to break out into comments and tell me all the reasons why that actually exists. This is a metaphor. This is a metaphor. And if both charges must exist for the radio to turn on, then you, the human being, the greatest creation, must also be a battery. And your relationship is either humming along or it's like, if both your negative ends are meeting, then it's like, it's rejecting. Have you ever tried to put two ends? It's like a magnet. It just rejects each other because they're not slotted into the self. And that's something to think about in your relationship. And so when I was making this, I was like, I know, I got to make something that's huge. I'm going to make the opposite. So if this is my codependent triangle, remember, I first learned about codependency at 8 years old. I'm a proud 48-year-old woman now. I'm totally fine with saying my age. 40 years. 40 years. 40 years. Yes, it feels like I was wandering in the desert for a long time. 40 years. Wanted to say, well, what is the answer, the antidote, the methadone to the codependent triangle? And so I made what's called the golden triangle. You are a third, and a third, and my deep love of baseball, my extraordinary love of baseball, which is a separate one. I will take anyone down that argues with me about this. Baseball had to have been created by God. It is layered with God. It is the greatest game, but it's also the greatest metaphor for all of life. The Trinity is all over it. And so if you think about this as a calling, if you think about this for a second, look at this data points. Look at how much data we have in the world. The thing that I found most fascinating is only 1.5 to 7% is actually human DNA. So if you look at a genome, it's not actually all the way human. There's lots we don't even know what we're made of. And I thought, how gorgeous, how amazing. The mystery is even in our genomes that we can't possibly know. When people say, oh, you only use so much of your brain and so much you doesn't get exposed to. Think about all these occurrences, whether you're looking at science and biology. You are a wonderful mystery loaded with data. And we just need to be able to read it. What does it actually say? So true love is not addiction. It's not. True love is not talking about your relationship, trying to solve and meet each other's needs constantly. It's not. It's partnership. But it's the relationship you first have with yourself, and it's a relationship that you first have with your faith. That's the first relationship you master. Then you have partnership. If you're in a relationship, you guys need to get your tentacles out of each other so you can live in a parallel way. Begin to understand who you really are. But most importantly, you need to say goodbye and mourn to all that no longer serves you. Everything that no longer serves you. You form these beliefs, which we're going to talk about next week, as a child. And you form these defense mechanisms to survive pain. Just a fact. It's just what happens to us emotionally. It just happens to us when thorns come in. And you can look at all the different theories. They're all ultimately saying the same thing. Relationships don't have to be hard. Not anymore. Once you each understand the language, the true language of human emotion, not a love language, that love language is still built on the basis of your emotional pain. So it can't be trusted yet. You can't do your love language until you actually know your emotional language, until you really understand who you are emotionally. And the biggest thing is, are you willing to allow yourself to believe in your truth? Can you take this evidence? And this is what we lay out in this course. You're going to learn all this evidence, because I don't believe in just going to a therapist and the therapist understands what's happening to you and they drip it out to you. I don't agree with that. I think that you should have the full playbook. I think that if you don't understand how to play the greatest instrument you were ever given, which is the self, you can't ultimately expect to have a relationship. Because if you don't know your instrument, you're not going to know theirs, and vice versa. So we needed a universal language of understanding our emotions. And we break it down in 12 steps, and we break it down over 3 phases, and we break it down in a relationship course and also a personal healing course. The personal healing course is all these different parts. Yes, I wrote them all, studied it, did it for a long time. So this is for you. If you are in a relationship, if you're dating, if you're married, if you're going through a divorce or contemplating a divorce, if you're single, if you're going through a breakup, if you've just caught your spouse cheating, whatever the scenario, if you are a human being who desires great love, this is for you. This is for you. This is through this course. Next week, we're going to dive into the blocks and beliefs. Today is about the calling. You scientifically, metaphorically, psychologically, through religion, doesn't matter the avenue, you have a calling. You have pain data, and it needs to be transformed into your golden triangle data. So I've worked with a lot of people over this last years. I've been running a tech company as a front-facing CEO. You can go on my LinkedIn and read about it. I also behind the scenes have been running my experiments, really working with humans, wanting to understand them because I wanted to understand mine. So I was my first subject for love. I was divorced. My heart was broken. I was a mess, and like a legitimate, can say that, train wreck, hot mess. I ended my relationship when my babies were 5 and 2. My little girls were 5 and 2. I was shamed for it. I felt ashamed. I was lost, but I knew that if I stayed in that pain relationship, I wouldn't be able to heal. And it wasn't because he was bad or any of that. He's a terrific father. I didn't know me, and I married him anyway. And I didn't know who I really was or what I really wanted. I was so broken from my life and my past. I had this broken, wounded spirit that the thorn just started to explode when I turned 30. And by the time I was 32 and 33, I was out. And then I spent the next 7-8 years going on this journey of healing. And when I went on this journey of healing, I wanted to finish this theory of Ahava. I wanted to finish it. And so I put myself through all the paces. I read the books. I wrote this theory to bring this to you now today. And so I'm so honored that you decided to participate in this masterclass. I hope you will come with us every single week. We will move through the 12 steps every single week. So this week, you learned the calling. Next Wednesday is the beliefs. This Friday is Finding Faith Friday, which we started last week. So we are just going to talk about beliefs there outside of relationships. So if you have a moment, give yourself an hour and just allow yourself a minute to believe this. The second part of the phase we will go through, and then to phase 3. So it's Thanksgiving tomorrow for some of you in the United States. You know, there's a mantra that everybody has. This was mine. When I decided to do I call it my faith walk, I went to a whole bunch of churches, met a rabbi, started to really dive in, read as much as I could, wanted to understand Islam and Judaism and Christianity, and dabbled into Buddhism, wanted to really just understand. And then I read this scripture, which was out of the book of Esther. And it said, born for such a time as this. So when I feel anxious, I just whisper to myself, born for such a time as this. So if you don't have your secret sifter or your mantra, take a moment today and find yours, just the one that when you feel all hope is lost, that's the one you go to, not 20, not 100, just one. Make that your mantra, like your calling card, and start to use that for your calling. So when I feel like, is this even helping? Is anybody even watching this? When I have all those doubts about what this is about, will anybody catch on? I have the same fears. It's scary to decide to do your calling. It's scary to rely on yourself and your soul. It's scary to do this on your own. It's so fucking worth it. But I know that it's also scary. So when I feel scary, and when I feel fear, I say, born for such a time as this, the book of Esther. So wherever you are in the world, I want you to know that you were born for such a time as this. So a couple of things that we are reading. Again, we've got the beliefs coming up right away. You can get my book. I would be more than grateful if you decided to read my book. It's a book you kind of read one page at a time. One of the books that we're reading here at Aha Healing, and we will change the book every 2 weeks. This book is Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. I chose this because I felt at this time period, we need to know our calling. And that even in the depths of absolute despair, wherever you are in the world, that there's hope, that there's love, that there's faith, and that your life carries a calling. And you just need to look at your pain data to know what it is. That's why I made the golden triangle. Take that pain data, transform pain into purpose. It has a purpose. It's not because you're bad and you deserved any of this. Now, if you'd like to join us, because no matter what, I just want you to be here every week. And if you never give us $1, I don't care. I'd rather just have you here. If you want to dive into this theory and understand the instrument of you, there is the link. You can head there right now and you can begin to take the relationship course. We also have the personal healing course. If you want to do a bigger session with us, we have that option as well. So you could just start with our big introductory special, which is there right now. You could do nothing and stay the same, but just come and see us every week because maybe there's some seeds we can drop. Otherwise, you can take all of the courses. So the real thing is, what do you want? And are you willing to give yourself a shot? That is the ultimate question. Here's a little bit of our team. So, what do you want? Take a moment to recognize that every person has a calling. And in relationship is the perfect opportunity for us to learn, to stretch, to become who we want to become. And I hope you will take that chance. Now, for those that are here, if you have any questions, we will be here for that. Please check out our website. Go to ahahealing.online. You can check that out. You can also check out our courses. Let me put that back up for you if you're interested in taking that. I will just bring that back. Someone just asked me to bring that back. You know, I gotta love technology. Just when I'm trying to do something. Right here. You can head to www.ahacourses.relationships. That will get you started today on this beautiful theory. So if you are open and ready, and if you want the most magnificent life, whatever it is, in whatever avenue, the path is inward. Go to that website, check it out. That is the map. You need a map because buried inside of you is the treasure. Thank you for coming. We will see you next week here at Aha Healing. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.